Welcome to this training on Acumatica screen, SO501010 Manage Sales Allocations. You can find additional content and training information referenced in this video inside of the resource package. This form is available only if the inventory and order management, as well as the inventory features, are enabled on the Enable Disable Features screen. You can use this screen to mass allocate available inventory to specific sales orders, as well as deallocate stock from sales orders back into available inventory. You can use selection criteria to narrow the range of sales order lines listed before processing to make it easier to allocate or deallocate items based on your company's distribution process. To access this screen, navigate to the Sales Orders workspace. Under the Processes section, click on Manage Sales Allocations. In this screen, there is a list of selection criteria in the Summary section at the top, starting with the Action dropdown. In this dropdown, there are two actions that can be performed. We can allocate available inventory to open sales order lines or deallocate inventory from sales orders back into available stock. First, I will demonstrate allocating available inventory to open sales order lines. Next, we need to choose the warehouse in which sales order demand needs inventory allocation. Notice that when I chose the warehouse, the grid below is populated with open sales order lines. To summarize, these are all open sales order lines in the wholesale warehouse that do not yet have inventory allocated to them. Let's look at the grid for a moment. Specifically, these three columns. In the Available for Shipping column, this tells us how much inventory has not yet been allocated to other sales orders. The quantity in this column is available to allocate to the sales order line listed. In the Quantity Unallocated column, this tells us how much of the inventory ID has not been allocated to the specific sales order line. And in the Quantity to Allocate column, this tells us how much inventory can be allocated from available stock to the specific sales order lines. Let's look at this first line item. For inventory ID Acumatica, we have 21 available for shipping. For order number SO501010 we need 10 to be allocated. Because we have enough in available inventory to cover the allocation needed for this sales order line, the quantity to allocate will be the same as the Quantity Unallocated column. Let's open sales order SO507462 by clicking on the blue hyperlink, which will open the sales order in a new window. Here, we can see the line item on the sales order for the Acumatica item with 10 eaches. With this line item selected, we can see the inventory details at the bottom of the screen. For the Acumatica, we have on hand 21 eaches. Available for shipping, we have 21 eaches, and allocated to this sales order is 0. We will watch this information change as I manually make changes to the sales order. With this line item selected, I can click on the Line Details button, which will open another dialog box with an option to allocate inventory. In this box, I can edit the ship on date, the ship line quantity, and the allocated checkbox. When I check the allocated box, notice how the details at the bottom of the sales order screen change the allocated quantity from 0 to 10. I can exit the line details box and save the sales order. When I exit the sales order, notice that the grid in my Manage Sales Allocation screen has changed. Sales order SO507462 is no longer on the list. This is because I just manually allocated available inventory to the whole line item on that sales order. Also notice that the number in the Available for Shipping column has been adjusted from 21 to 11 because 10 of these have been allocated to SO507462. Going back to the Summary section at the top, I can change the action drop-down from Allocate Sales Orders to Deallocate Sales Orders. Now, my grid only has one line item, Sales Order SO507462. This is the only sales order with allocated inventory. So this action gives me the ability to deallocate inventory from this sales order and put 10 eaches back into available inventory. The line item disappears from my list, and I can switch the action back to allocate sales orders. When I do this, we're back to where we started. In the summary area at the top, I have additional filtering options. One of those options is inventory ID. I will add this Keurig item we've been working with to this filter field. Focusing on this item, we have 3 sales order lines that need allocation from available inventory. There are a total of 20 eaches on sales order lines, and all of those are covered by the 21 eaches in available inventory. However, what would happen if another sales order came in? I'll demonstrate this by clicking on the last sales order, SO501010. I can copy this sales order for demonstration purposes and create a new sales order with the same details. Now that I have a new sales order with an open status, I can exit this sales order pop-up screen, and it has been added to the bottom of my grid in the Manage Sales Allocations screen. Notice that the quantity unallocated is 5, but the quantity to allocate is 1. This is due to the previous sales order lines theoretically consuming the available inventory, driving that available quantity down. This leaves only 1 available to allocate for my new sales order. If I select all of these lines and allocate the suggested inventory to them by clicking Process, Acumatica will allocate the quantities, and the list will be empty. With the first 3 line items fully allocated and the last line item only partially allocated, you may be wondering why that last line item is not on the list. It is because we now have no available inventory to allocate, so it will not be on this list. This screen is an action screen, so if there is no possible action to take, it will not give us an option. If I change the action drop-down to deallocate sales orders, these 4 line items will appear in my grid with the option to deallocate the inventory back into available stock. Also notice that when we are mass deallocating inventory, the list is now sorted from the latest date to the earliest date. This is strategic to give us more time to resupply the Keurig item, so there is more available inventory later on to cover the sales order quantities. I will use my column configurator to show the actual line quantity on the sales order line. Here, we can see that for my new sales order, I have a quantity of 5 needed for the sales order, but only 1 is allocated. All of the other lines are covered. If I click on the blue hyperlink for my new sales order, it will open in a new dialog box. Notice that next to the quantity, I have a yellow circle with an exclamation point. This is an Acumatica warning that the available inventory for this Keurig item will go negative with the presence of this sales order at this quantity. As demonstrated earlier, if I click on the line item and click on the line details button, we can see the 1 each that I allocated from the Manage Sales Allocation screen. But there is now an additional line with a balance of 4 eaches. The allocated box is unchecked. If I attempt to allocate the remaining 4 eaches by checking the allocated checkbox, I will get a red circle with an X telling me that the inventory quantity will go negative. So even if I leave that box checked and click OK, it does not have the 4 eaches to allocate, so that action was null. I'll open the line details again, and we'll see that the allocated checkbox is not checked. Let's go back to the allocation process and review some of the other filtering criteria fields in the summary area. I'll start by deallocating the inventory so we can see the list of all orders without allocation. Now that all inventory has been deallocated, you can see on the Allocate Sales Orders option that our Keurig item drives the Quantity to Allocate column down, so that there is only 1 each left to allocate on the last sales order. Let's take a quick look at the date criteria in the summary section. Notice the drop-down for the field labeled Select By. This drop-down has 4 options to choose from that can then be further filtered by the start date and end date. If the start date field is empty, the filtered range defaults to the earliest date available. The end date is required and defaults to the current system date. Jumping back down to the grid, let's slide all the way to the right to see these date columns relative to the date filtering criteria. The line ship-on selection is the most commonly used, as the purpose of this screen is to assign available inventory to open sales orders. The first option in the drop-down is the order date. Notice that the last 2 sales order lines in the grid have 2 different order dates, and the last item has an earlier order date than the second to last. When I choose the order date option from the drop-down, the grid resorts the list by this column. Now the list is sorted by order date from earliest to latest. The last 2 order lines in the grid have switched places based on this sorting criteria. The same sorting functionality will happen when I choose the second item in the drop-down line requested on. The final option in the drop-down is the Cancel By option. This lets you know that the customer may want to cancel the order if it cannot be delivered by this date. Other filtering options in the summary section include the order type, the order status, and the order priority. The order priority can be manually set on the sales order itself, or it can default to a specific value based on the customer. I'll go into this AA customer profile. Under the Shipping tab, the priority field can be found in the Shipping Instructions section. If I change this, the field will default to this value on all future sales orders for this customer. We can also filter the grid by order number. So, if we have one sales order with 50 lines on it, we can allocate inventory line by line on the sales order. Earlier, we did use this inventory ID field to filter by the Keurig item. But notice that there is a button labeled List next to the field. If I click on this button, it will open an inventory ID list table that I can configure. In this list, I will add the AM Keurig item as well as the Acer laptop computer. In the Inventory ID field, we have this system-generated value called List, and this indicates that the List button was used. To clear this, I can open the list again with the List button, or simply refresh the screen to clear the criteria, so I don't need to delete the list one by one. The final area of selection criteria is the customer class and customer fields. If I choose Local in the customer class field, it will remove the bartender customer toward the bottom of the list as they are in a different customer class. If I want to look at only one customer in the grid, I can use the customer criteria field to do this. If I like all of the filtering criteria I have entered into this summary area, I can create a custom filter to be used by myself and my colleagues if I prefer. Let's say that we want the option to quickly jump to customer Alt-Ace with order type SO and a cancellation date equal to or before today's date. I do this by clicking on the Filter Settings button at the top of my summary area. When I click on this, the Filter Settings dialog box opens. When I click on the drop-down, the only option I have to choose from is All Records. To begin building a new filter, I can click on the Add Row button to get started. In the first row, I'm going to set the customer to Alt-Ace. leaving the operator as, and I'm going to add another row. In the second row, I'll set the order type to SO. Finally, I'm going to set the cancel by date to less than or equal to today. I will save this filter with the name Alta is cancel. My filter is now an option in the drop-down menu under all records. I'll check the box for shared, meaning this filter can now be used by my colleagues when they look at the screen. I also have the option to set this as the default filter when I first come into the screen if this was my only purpose of using this screen. When I save that setting, then click on Apply, I now have a new tab at the top of the grid with the title of my filter. Now I can easily jump back and forth between all records and my Alt Ace Cancel filter. To summarize, in this training, we reviewed how to filter criteria in the summary area, how to quickly jump to sales orders via hyperlinks, how to mass allocate or deallocate inventory, and finally, we created a filter for quick use. This has been an overview of Acumatica Screen SO501010 Manage Sales Allocations. Thank you for watching.